Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Triumph of Evil. I'm your host, Bishop Pete, and today I want to talk about demons. I talked last time about Satan, that is to say, Donald Trump, and I put these things in theological terms because, after all, that's our theology: Christianity, Judaism, Islam has provided us in the West with the vocabulary for describing good and evil, and we might as well use it. I mean, I'm not a doctrinaire religious person by any means, but it's useful to use those terms. And I do believe in that sense that Donald Trump is Satan. He is the devil. And we talked about that last episode. That is to say, I talked about it, and maybe you listened if you're one of the few in the crowd. But the whole idea of, what is evil? Evil is the absolute lack of regard for or desire to do anything that's good for humankind as a whole. Evil is the absence of generosity, of compassion. Evil is greed. Evil is fear-mongering. Evil is pure selfishness. And all these things are, they're characteristics not only of the United States under Donald Trump, but they're characteristics of the man himself. And there's no question about that. I mean, if anybody doubts that, if anybody wants to kind of put a finer point on that, then, they can, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Donald Trump is evil. Donald Trump is Satan, and the people who serve him are his demons. And by that, I don't just mean the people, let's say, in his cabinet or his henchmen in the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson and others, or his henchmen in the Senate. But I mean also the people who put him in office in the first place. Because, let's face it, a majority of the American voters put him in office. And, the guy didn't become the person that he is now, the president and the would-be autocrat, by usurping the election. I mean, he won the damn election. And let's take a quick look at that, some of the demographics. And I'll have to kind of recall these things from memory, but I believe that between 55 and 60% of white men voted for Donald Trump. So as far as I'm concerned, they're demons. And a fairly high percentage of white women, maybe 50%, also voted for Donald Trump. And they're demons. And apparently a high percentage, I think well over 50%, maybe 55% of Hispanic males voted for Donald Trump. And the Hispanic population in the United States has been, thoroughly militarized and, incorporated into the armed forces and the police forces of this country. And, they're perfectly willing to round up other Hispanic people. They don't have any sense of solidarity with any more recent immigrants. If they're here and they're citizens, then I think it's like, fuck the rest of you people, shut the door, And that's a characteristic of second-generation immigrants and has been all along. As soon as one group of people gets here and gets established and gets more or less recognized as members of society, then they become really stingy when it comes to wanting other people to come in, let's put a wall up there, And so it's not surprising to me. It's disappointing, but the myth of like Latino solidarity or brown power or something like that is exactly that. It's a myth. There is proof of that in terms of who voted for Donald Trump. So if you're one of the, let's say, 55% of Hispanic males and maybe 45 to 50% of Hispanic females who voted for Donald Trump. Congratulations. Fuck you. You're a bunch of demons. The only group really that comes through as being not demons is African Americans, who, I think something like 90% of all African American women, maybe more than 90%, voted for Kamala Harris. And 80 to 85% of African American men also voted for Kamala Harris. And they were smart to do so. And as a result, they're not demons. Those other little pieces of the, that make up the full 100%, yeah, you're demons. But the point I'm trying to make is that if, you can't, there's no halfway here. There's no middle ground. You can't be a little bit of a demon. You can't be a little bit evil. You're either evil or you're essentially evil, or you're essentially good. And it's not about what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's not about how often you take your kids to Disney World or host a Thanksgiving dinner or any of those purely individual things. It's about what you are willing to share with people who are less fortunate. It's about whether you're willing to or believe in giving people who work for a living more money that otherwise corporations are just going to amass to themselves. It's about whether you think that it's a good thing or even a moral thing that there are people who are billionaires out there who have all that fucking money when other people don't have that much money. It's about whether you believe that people who aren't cisgendered males and females and, who aren't straight should be allowed to, to have the same rights as people who are straight. It's about, probably most importantly, it's about whether you are a racist or not. And if you voted for Donald Trump, then you're a racist. There's not much question about it. And Donald Trump is delivering to you, if you were a racist who voted for Donald Trump, and I doubt if anybody watching this show falls under that category, but if anybody falls under that category is watching, fuck you. And anyway, but you're gonna get your money's worth if you're a racist. If you believe that basically white people should be running this country, well, right, white people do run the country, and they always have. But I mean, if you believe that nobody but white people and straight white people should be running the United States, then you're gonna get what you paid for here. You're gonna get what you're hoping for from Donald Trump. He is systematically committing all kinds of heinous racist acts. And, in small ways as well as large ways. Racist, anti-gay, whatever it might be. He's definitely catering to, his constituency, which, by the way, he wouldn't cater to if he didn't believe that shit himself. I mean, he's essentially a racist also. Going back and naming military bases after Confederate generals, taking away the name of a gay person from a naval vessel, trying to sort of erase an emphasis on the accomplishments of African American people, even in furtherance of themselves, much less in terms of things that they've done for, America as a whole. He's constantly undermining and denigrating those kinds of things. He didn't even bother to acknowledge the existence of Juneteenth as a holiday, which apparently he did do during his first term. But, now that the gloves are off, he doesn't have to pretend to do anything. So, anything that kind of seems to favor people who are who are black, or seems to favor recent immigrants from non-European countries. He's not having any truck with it. The guy has put a travel ban, which means basically banning people from coming into this country, systematically on, I don't know, something like 36 different countries in the world. And I don't think any of them is a predominantly white country, unless you count like Arabs as, Middle Easterners as white people, which some people do. But I mean, he's got pretty much like half the countries in Africa are on the no travel list, but no countries in Europe are on that list, and it's kind of interesting, So I guess it's going to be for the rest of the Trump administration, at least, it's going to be okay to come into this country if you're white and not an Arab, and if you are an Arab or you're not white, then we don't want you. Even places as close to our borders as Haiti, are being put on the travel ban list. So yeah. There's not much question about the fact that he's racist and that he's full of hate for people who aren't, like him. And that fits really well with the people who voted for him, because they don't want people, dark-skinned people from other countries coming in here. And they don't want the African Americans who are here to have any more rights than they already have. In fact, most white people my age, think that black people already have too much. They think that they're the ones who are getting all the welfare, for example, when in fact statistics will show that a majority of people who collect things that fall under the penumbra of welfare, food stamps and other kinds of financial assistance and aid, are white people. And it may be that African Americans, I don't know this for certain, but it may be that as a percentage of the total African American population, more African Americans are receiving some sort of assistance than white Americans are. That could be the case, but where's all the money going? The majority of the money is going to white people, and but they'll, most white people are willing to sacrifice something if it means that a black person can't get that same thing. They're willing to do without even. So all the prognostication, the predicting that somehow the poor people of America, the poor white people of America, are going to wake up to the fact that Donald Trump is stealing money from them, when their benefits, their Medicare, their Medicaid, more importantly, because I don't think anything's really going to happen to Medicare, but that the Medicaid is, and the food stamps, whatever its acronym it goes under now, EBT or something, they're perfectly willing to maybe have a harder time doing that. And, they're not going to rise up as with one voice and say, we're going to join our African American brothers and sisters in opposition to Donald Trump's economic policies and to the Republicans' cutting of the budget for us. Because, they're more envious and more hateful of black people than they are concerned about their own financial welfare. Better to be poor and white, than have to share wealth with African American people. And that's an essential thing. So that whole group of people, which evidently makes up a majority of the population, and at least the majority of the voting population, voted for the Republican, Donald Trump, and for other Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And as far as I'm concerned, they're demons. That's what the fuck they are. They're demons. Like I said before, and I got trailed off on it, but it doesn't matter whether, you know, you're a good person to your kids or your grandkids or anything, if you vote Republican. Voting Republican cancels out all the little good things that you do in your life on a day-to-day basis. Because there's nothing that people who are sitting on the fence and mealy-mouthed, you know, love everybody, religious kind of people, want to do more than to say, well, you know, there's some good in everybody. Fuck no. There are people who are just bad. They're evil and they're demons. And those are the ones who voted for Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump and all of his cabinet, his henchmen in the House and the Senate and in the executive branch, they're all evil. They're demons. And, you know, the sooner people can wrap their minds around that and let go of this idea that somehow or another, you know, we have this political party system where, well, both sides are kind of, you know, there's some good and there's some bad to both sides, you know. The sooner we realize and embrace the idea that, no, there's only one party that represents anything close to good, and that's the Democratic Party, and that anyone who's willing to vote for or be a Republican is just not good. They're evil. The sooner we recognize that and embrace that idea, the better off we're going to be, because it's going to keep us from wasting a lot of time trying to reconcile the two parties. You know, Liz Cheney, you know, as long as she remains a Republican, I don't care if she gets down on her hands and knees and kisses Kamala Harris's feet. You know, she's still a Republican and she's still evil. Now, she did a good thing by voting, if indeed she did, for Kamala Harris. But she's got to let go of the rest of that and come over to the good side. So, you know, I want to wrap this up because I think I've made my point regarding demons. So at the top, you've got Donald Trump, Satan, who, by the way, goes by various names in the Christian lexicon, the father of lies being one of them. And I think that's an excellent one for Donald Trump, because, you know, this guy lies so much that I do not honestly think that he believes that he does lie. I think that he's decided at some point that if he said it, it must be true. I mean, he's that much of a, you know, self-possessed or, you know, narcissist that, you know, I could see him believing that. And so the whole idea of, you know, creating fiction, basically, telling people, you know, that red is green and white is black and all that kind of stuff, is something that comes really, really easily to him. He doesn't go to bed and say, oh my God, I lied 18 times today, or 48 times, or 176 times. He goes to bed and says, I said it, it must therefore be true. You know, so kind of like I lie, therefore I am, or something, you know. And so, yeah, this Satan, the father of lies, is running the country and creating a whole different kind of dichotomy between truth and lies, and really trying to kind of, you know, create an atmosphere where people believe that if he said it, it must therefore be true. Even if it sounds a little silly, even if his, say, working vocabulary is a little rudimentary, you know, that of a 4th or 5th grader or something. You know, if Donald Trump said it, then it must be true. And we got a whole lot of people like that. And, you know, when you look at, I don't know, the classical works, Paradise Lost and all that kind of stuff, you know, Satan's demons are just his henchmen. You know, they're the people that do his bidding. And there was no better way to do Donald Trump's bidding in November of 2024 than to vote for the guy and put him in office. So they're all demons and they can all go to hell. Well, that's about all I have time for in this episode. But next time I'm going to start talking about some individual aspects of evil that are today being emphasized by the Republican Party. And the first one I'm going to talk about is racism. Until then, that's all we have time for in this episode of The Triumph of Evil. But this is your old pal, Bishop Pete, saying so long.